Unmute this so everybody can hear. I think that's good. I'm hoping. Check, check. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. How's everyone doing? Hope you're doing well. Staying warm. I'd like to welcome you to the November club meeting of the Johnston County Beekeepers Association. And first thing we'd like to do at this point would be to ask everybody to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Up there, yep. Over here. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, guys. First thing we want to do, we'll take care of a little bit of club business while we got everybody here. If you came in today and you were on our membership list, you paid your memberships, you probably were handed a ballot. Of course, that is a very important time in this club because right now we're in the transition period for new directors, presidency, and all positions. So what we would like for you to do is before you leave, fill out that ballot, write in somebody if you have somebody. I think we do have a few corrections on it. If you do have it in front of you, Al Hildreth, you can remove him. We're only voting in two directors this year. So that is a mistake that needs to be revised. And then also for the secretary position, I believe we have
Donna and Sherry, co-secretary.
Yes, if you just raise your hand, Donna. Yes, thank y'all. Thank y'all. Okay, great. Thank you. And yep, they will be running as well. You are still able to write somebody in if you'd like. May, go ahead. Is there anything you'd like to add? Okay, yep. So, you know, if you want to write those people in or you want to write somebody else that's not listed there, please feel free to do that. So with that being said, that takes care of a lot of the important information we need to get out ahead of time. So we can talk about
mention Jim.
Oh, and one other thing, Jim Dempster will also be able to fill in for program director. He has volunteered to hold that role. So if you would like to write him in or write somebody else in, feel free to do so. But Jim will be running as well. All right, guys. So another thing, you know, while we're discussing membership, this next meeting in December at our standing meeting, I believe the date the 20th, we'll be holding our club dinner, Christmas dinner. So that will be catered. But I can't remember the name.
Daniel Blackburn's.
I can't. Daddy O's, or I believe it was something.
Fat Daddies.
Fat Daddies, yeah. Out of
Daddy D's barbecue.
Well, I think Daniel's out here. He's trying to tell us what he's saying, but you go ahead and tell us. What was it?
It's Daddy D's barbecue.
Daddy D's barbecue. Okay, so Daddy D's barbecue will be providing us with plates and or catering, an actual catering event. You come in, they'll serve us. You can eat as much as you like. You know, everybody that's a member is welcome to come. Bring a family member, of course, and just we're going to have fellowship, enjoy our time together for the holidays. And one other thing we'll be doing during that meeting is we'll be having a silent auction. And we're kind of getting close to the deadline of that. But if anybody has any kind of equipment they're looking to, you know, auction off, give someone for better use, please bring that. We'll auction it off if you would kindly donate it to the club. But we do have quite a few things we're hoping to put out for people to enjoy and bid on and just have a good time. So we're hoping to have some Christmas music. Yes, sir.
We're going to have that here.
Yes, sir.
And can you bring stuff that you'd like to donate to the auction next month's meeting?
That's what it is.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think the thing we may try to do is if you want to go ahead, if you want to bring it in next meeting, we'll just have some blank sheets and we'll set up, a starting price and then give people some room to bid if they'd like to. So we'll get if you have stuff you want to bring, just feel free to bring it in. It'll be fine. We'll work it.
So the dinner is the next meeting.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
yes, sir. Yeah. We're going to replace a meeting where, of course, we'll do like beekeepers corners and things like that, but it'll mainly be a dinner here. So that is some items. Yes, sir.
Auction items, that will be later.
You know, I think we're kind of leaving that open. I know we've got some interesting some folks that do other things outside of beekeeping that they can bring an auction. And I totally think that's acceptable. I haven't discussed it with our board, but I believe that's a great idea if you have something like to say. Absolutely. Feel free to bring it or donate. Kindly. Thank you. Yes, sir. So, you know, and again, guys, if you missed that, if you have things that aren't bee related that you would like to donate to the club and have them auctioned off that night, please feel free to bring those. So, the next thing, guys, is, you know, we're still doing t-shirt sales. We're doing t-shirt and hats. May's back there. She's got the sign-up sheet. I believe when we first got here, there was 9 more sales that need to be made. 5 more. So, you know, to get that order in, we need 5 more shirts. I don't know if anybody wants to purchase 5 themselves. So, you know, if you buy, just see May. She'll get you a hat, t-shirt, what have you, and that'll come in at the December meeting, I believe. So, also, guys, we're still in the midst of doing our honey sales. If you'd like to support us and buy some of the Club Apiary honey, we're selling that here at the Ag Center. That's $10 a jar, 16 ounces. I believe we've about sold half of that at this point. I believe we had an upwards around 90 jars. We're down to around 35, 40 range.
I didn't get to talk to anybody today, so
Yeah, well, it could be gone, but for the most part, I think we do have some available here at the Ag Center. So if you'd like to purchase some of that, please talk with one of us and we'll happily get you a jar of it. Looks real nice. It's very nice to look at. You know, it's got a good label on it. The Joko Grows slogan on the back, you know, that we're kind of supporting alongside the Ag Center here. So feel free to grab some of that if you like. Unfortunately, we don't have Al Hildreth here tonight. He's feeling a little under the weather, but he did want me to announce to everybody that in January 11th, we're trying to get ahead of the ball here and offer a beekeepers class. So I think it's Beekeepers Basics, just for anybody who's wanting to get involved in beekeeping. You know, if you've got somebody who wants to do it, someone who's kind of been on the fence, tell them about this class. You know, we want to do it in January 11th. That way, by the time it gets springtime, you're already ready to go. You'll have everything you need to get started and be successful. And we're hoping that that gives people enough headway to build up into March and April. So that's January 11th. And the prices for that will be $100 for non-members, $95 for members, and then $40 for spouse or couples. So what that would be is if it's a couple scenario, it'd be $40 a person. So if you come as a couple, we're giving you a discounted price. The next thing, we've got a great speaker tonight. So I don't want to take up a whole lot of her time. We've heard a lot of great things about her. She spoke here before. We've had her interviewed, put her on YouTube quite a few times. She's got a lot of experience when it comes to beekeeping. And tonight she's going to speak with us on Darwinian beekeeping. So without further ado, please help me welcome Betsy Spencer. Yeah, so I think if you want to use this right here, you can change your slides like that. That makes it easy. Maybe keep them right here. I think you can get the limited mix. Maybe this one.
Thank you. Great to be here tonight. I hope everybody's having a good bee season and get your bees tucked in for winter. So I'm going to speak tonight. Let's see what happened here. I'm going to speak tonight on Darwinian beekeeping, and it's a protocol that has been developed that is, the DBBB is the Darwinian Black Bee Box, and I'll give you an analogy later on to help you understand what that is. But basically what it is an evolutionary approach to beekeeping. You use the principles of natural selection to develop locally adapted queens. Can you hear me? Okay. Locally adapted queens that are bees that are fit for survival for the area. They're adapted to the seasons, etc., to the local pests, and they're mite resistant and hopefully disease resistant, and end up hopefully with a sustainable population. So just a little background about how I got to this place to run this experiment. I started out as a commercial beekeeper, well, actually a backyard beekeeper for a short while, and very quickly moved on to be a commercial beekeeper working for Jack Tapp at Busy Bee Apiaries, running his queen operation. And so during that time, we had moved from using buckfast to using hygienic bees. We started out with the Minnesota hygienic, and then we couldn't get Minnesota's. Marla Spivak spun that program off to 3 commercial beekeepers to raise open mated queens. So you could no longer get inseminated Minnesotas, which we were using inseminated stock. And so that's when we moved to the VSH stock, which I really liked a lot. And we stuck with that. And so then when Jack kind of semi-retired and I went on to do some other things, but I ran a sideline operation out of my home at my property in Franklinton. And so as being a sideline beekeeper, I was running from 50 to 150 hives. And my main objective was to raise queens. And I still had the goal of raising mite-resistant, sustainable stock. So for 13 years, I did not treat with chemicals. And I used very mechanical means of IPM, integrated pest management. And of course, I found that raising queens, most of my colonies, the majority of my colonies, were in 5-frame nukes. And when you're splitting in the spring to increase mating boxes, you're getting a lot of break and brood. Then you run queens through those all summer, you're getting constant break and brood. And I have found that that is really one of the best ways to keep your mites down is break and brood. For the first couple of years, when I was doing mite counts, I never had a problem with my mating boxes. And as a result, I just went to doing like a semi spot check for the mating boxes. And then I would check my larger sport hives with mite counts. My larger ones, if I had a problem, I would freeze a couple frames of brood and that would take care of it. The bees, that killed 2 birds with 1 stone because I could also, when I put that frozen frame back in, I could see how long it took the bees to clean that frame out, and they would do it just in a couple of days. So that was similar to the freezing the brood with the, what do you call it? What's the gas? Liquid nitrogen that they use with the 4-inch PVC pipe, except I was using a whole frame. And my bees would clean that thing out like crazy. So I knew I was breeding for mite resistance, for hygienic behavior, and like all of your queen producers, I was having like maybe about 5 characteristics that I was pulling from my survivor hives every year. The hygienic behavior, low mite counts, docile behavior, because I don't like to wear a veil, good honey producers, and good wintering over, good growth. So that is really sort of a limited way of using your genetics. So the experiment is to use natural selection instead of targeted selection. Oops. How do I go back? I skipped one. It's pressed too hard. It's not a touch screen. Okay, I'm getting used to touch screens. Okay, I got to move the cursor. Okay, so some of the things that influenced me to move into this direction One was Dave Tarpey. I was a participant in his original 2010 Born and Bred program, and then follow up in the advanced program. And I had a lot of discussions with Dave about raising hygienic stock and mite-resistant stock. And I know that his ultimate goal in this program was to get beekeepers to work together to create locally adapted bees. And it really, the last time I talked to him at one of the state meetings, he seemed a little disappointed that the Born and Bred program hadn't moved to that level yet. And so that's part of why I'm trying to do this. At the time speaking to him, though, I felt very frustrated because he said, well, to really have a good breeding program, you need to run about 300 hives. I said, that's probably beyond my ability to do right now because I'm a one-man operation, and 300 hives is really a lot to take care of. So I kind of put it on the back burner. Then I was reading a lot of Tom Seeley's stuff. Is everybody familiar with Dr. Seeley? He has spoken at our state meetings several times, written a lot of great books. But Susie Spencer sent me a video that he had done on this Darwinian beekeeping topic, and I was very interested. And he also had attached to that a link to a paper where they created this black bee box protocol. And this does not require the 300 hives because the 300 hives protocol is one where you're using targeted breeding, targeted traits. And Sue Covey is actually running one of those, and that involves insemination. So with the 300 hives, and I don't do insemination, I had ruled that out. But when I looked over the Darwinian beekeeping protocol, I said, that's doable. So I started thinking about it, and I've been thinking about it for a couple of years. And I thought I had a couple of beekeepers lined up last year to start getting into it, but they got really busy and it never came to fruition. But this year, I got a beekeeper friend of mine who started out as one of my mentees, and she has really done a great job with bees, and she lives in Franklinton, not too far from me, and she was excited to try it too. So the two of us have been doing it. Not bad for two old ladies. She's not as old as I am, but the two of us are managing. So the authors of the Black Bee Box, I read their article, looked that over, looked at what their procedure was, what their protocol was, and I said, okay, I think that Terry and I can handle that. And so what it uses is selective pressure on the bees, on the genes of the bees to eliminate, so that's negative, you're breeding negatively, because what you're doing is you're killing off the traits that are not deemed necessary for survival or encourage survival. So what you're doing is ending up concentrating the genes that are going to benefit survival of the bees. So some examples of selection, targeted selection, not natural selection, are your mites. Look at what happens with your mites. Every year it's a new silver bullet, right? And who is having sustainable colonies without doing anything to them? Raise your hand because I want to talk to you. Okay, so nobody. And that's kind of where I was. My bees were doing well without treatment, without chemical treatment. But, they still weren't what I was looking for. So I just read an article, the elephants, they're a good example of how quickly the selection process can work. There was an article about what's happening to the elephants in a couple of African war-torn countries. They had like 8 years of war, and the poachers were killing off the elephants for their tusks. And so what happened was, because they started selecting for elephants with no tusks, so that the elephants in that area are starting to be born with no tusks. That's a serious problem for elephants, because for male elephants, it's a fatal genetic selection. They don't survive. And the females survive, but tusks are a very important tool for elephants, right? So that is just an example of how fast selection can work when you put pressure on a species. Another thing is weeds. All these Roundup ready crops that they've been making, a lot of you probably are farmers, you might be familiar with this, but I know out in the Midwest where they're doing a lot of large monoculture crops, and they're using the glyphosate so much with the GMO crops and all, they're growing Roundup ready resistant weeds, and some of them have gotten so big and so tough that it's tearing up the equipment. So again, that's selection. So my goals are for varroa resistance, raising locally adapted survival stock, and using non-chemical means of taking care of our bees. Oops. It's going backwards. Oh, okay. I see. I have to move the cursor. Okay, so this is just a quick example of what happens. Each end is a mite. When you apply your silver bullet this year, not every mite is going to be affected by that. Those mites that live, they're resistant. And then they produce, and each female foundress mite is capable of producing 5 more female mites in just one generation, 6 if she's in drone brood. So look how quickly, that will give you an idea of how quickly the exponential growth becomes. Okay, so targeted versus natural selection. Targeted is what I've been doing for like the last 15 years, where I am selecting my survival stock based on a certain number of traits. So I mentioned my traits that I was looking for before, so I won't repeat that. But natural selection affects hundreds of genes, literally hundreds of genes that can contribute to the survival. So you can bring in lots and lots and lots of different genes by bringing in bees from all over the country and that sort of stuff, where you might have a lot of mix of genes, but that's different from functional diversity. Functional diversity is the diversity that's actually contributing to the bee's survival. There are a lot of problems with bringing bees in from all over. They're not adapted to the local climate necessarily, the local seasonality, the local flora, that sort of thing. And actually, that's how all the pests that we have right now, every exotic pest was moved here from someplace else because of moving bees. So let's get to the protocol. The protocol requirements that require a somewhat remote location, which I happen to have, access to these locations, access to set up yards, equipment for up to 150 colonies, ability to increase bees, which I have, and a financial ability to lose bees, because this is going to be a brutal process. So I'm retired now. I don't pay my bills with the bees anymore, so I can afford for bees to die. And that's why this protocol is maybe not for the commercial beekeeper, the large beekeeper, or for the backyard beekeeper, because a lot of these requirements might not fit in. Like if you're in a subdivision, there's lots of other beekeepers around you. I just happened to be in an area where I was the only beekeeper pretty much for many years. For a couple of years, things kind of didn't work out as well, because I don't know how many of you know Larry Green. I think everybody probably knows Larry. He's big in bees. He was wintering over his pollination hives on a farm near me for a couple of years. And so his stock was interbreeding with mine. And so I could see the changes in my bees. But now he's moved out. I have those locations now myself. And there's like maybe 2 other beekeepers around me, and they're each bee havers and have like 1 hive. And so the protocol allows for that. It allows for a little bit of leakage of genes into the project without it being a big problem. Let's see. So Tom Seeley's research was but based on the Arnott Forest up in New York near Ithaca. And it was an area, his remote area was 17 square kilometers. And he's done lots and lots of research in this going way back into the early 90s. And so he already had a pretty good idea of what the bee situation was in the Arnott Forest before mites. So there was before mites and after mites. And so when the mites came, he mapped the Arnott Forest, the bee colonies in the forest, using bee lining. And if anybody's interested in that, he wrote a whole book about it called Following the Wild Bees. And so he mapped the whole forest and figured out, where the bee trees were, and looked at the density. He figured out things like what was the preferable size of cavity that they like, which this really works for me at my age. It was a 10 frame with a medium on top, and I figure 2 deep nukes with a medium on top probably is fairly similar, because I have a lot of nuke equipment, being what I was doing before. He also established that the survival rate of the established hives ran around 84%, and the survival rate of founder hives, that's your swarms, was about 24%, and that the density was in the forest was about the same as it was in pre-mites. And in nature, the bees like to have 15 to 20% drone comb. And this was something that in my discussions with Dave Tarpey that he reiterated more than once, that 20% drone comb. And I know many of us don't have that much in there. And he said most of the losses of the new founder hives was due to starvation. And I can kind of attest to that from this year, and I'll get into that a little bit more. Okay, so the Darwinian black bee box, these are the authors of the protocol, the paper that I based all this on, my project on. And so they are from Germany and the Netherlands and Sweden. So they're operating in Europe, and they have several things. And if anybody wants any of this information, just email me. I'll send you links to all of the information that I have, the Seeley's stuff and this paper. I have links to all of it. So if you just let me know, I'll send you links. So they published it in 2019, and they really, really want people to try this. This is nothing that's protected or anything like that. They're encouraging people to try this protocol to create populations of sustainable, bee genetics. Okay, so I just put some of the highlights from their abstract. And so in their abstract, they stated that targeted breeding has failed. And I agree with that. Even though I was doing my best to breed bees, I do agree that, you know, we still have a problem with, and it's not just the mites, because I had this conversation with Dave. Said I had 2 double deeps right next to each other. They were pretty equal. One had 2 mites at the end of the season count. One had 7 mites at the end of the season count. The one with 2 mites died. The one with 7 mites lived and did gangbusters in the spring. And he said, well, he thinks that his hypothesis is that it's more factor of the virus load than the mite load, how many viruses those mites are vectoring. And I think that he is correct on that, just from anecdotal observation. Where natural selection has succeeded at least 7 times. One of those is in the R0 forest, because those are completely unmanaged bees. And of course, Tom Seeley has done small experiments too, based on the same concept, with maybe not the exact protocol that we're going to talk about tonight. So the protocol relies on within population mating. And that's why you're in this remote area where there are not a lot of other beekeepers, because you want the population to the drones and the queens in that population to mate with each other and not be bringing in outside genes. No treatments will be given with the exception of the very beginning project in the spring. And the selection is based on survival and proliferous development. That means hives that show good growth. They raise lots of drones, they expand, their nest expands well, and then they winter over well. And that this will lead to locally adapted varroa resistant populations. Okay, so the black box analogy, essentially it's like, you know, the bingo things that have all the numbers in them. You throw all the alleles that are on the genes into that pool and stir it up, and then what comes out is the survivor. So that is what increases your functional diversity, because you have all these different combinations of genes. The ones that are beneficial to survival remain, and the ones that are not beneficial, they're dead ends. So that's basically what the concept works on. But it's not just mite resistance, because there's so many other things killing the bees. So it's some viruses, fungi, all that sort of stuff. Then you also have the concept of raising a less virulent pest, because if a pest kills the host, that pest will die out too. So as things develop, theoretically, the parasite should become less virulent and become naturalized to the area. Because mites were naturalized to Apis ceranae, the eastern honeybee. They co-evolved for 30 million years. And so they don't kill off Apis ceranae, mites don't. But our European honeybees did not co-evolve with the mites, and that's why they are so stricken by that. Okay, so here are the advantages to the protocol. It's fast. You don't have to go 30 million years. Selective pressure causes things to speed up, and it's not expensive. That was a big one for me, because I can't afford to put a lot of money into a project. And of course, doing Sue Covey's protocol with 300 hives and doing insemination and that sort of thing, that was beyond my scope. And so another advantage is that you may actually uncover traits that lead to the resistance. Inclusive natural selection may uncover rare traits, rare alleles that are beneficial to increase genetic diversity. So anything, hopefully, that is beneficial to survival will stay in that pool. Okay, so two places that this protocol is being done. One is Randy Oliver. Everybody familiar with Randy Oliver, scientific beekeeper? Okay, he's in California, and he has started a comparable program in 2018, and he used a pre-selection component, and kind of that's what I'm doing too, is a pre-selection. So I've already been doing survival stock. I would bring in not every year, but every couple of years, some queens from different places in the country that were VSH stock, and then I would follow them through the course of a season, raise some daughters off of them, and follow them into the next spring to see how they did. Did they show the traits I wanted? Did their daughters do well? And were they still alive in the spring? If they did all those, I used them as breeder queens. If they did not make that whole year observation, I did not use them in my breeding program. And then my yards, all my support hives and some of my breeders were all survival stock. So another place this is being done is a Dutch commercial beekeeping company. And this is an example of how they're bringing in hobbyist beekeepers. And that's something that y'all can even think about, it working together as a group. And they've been doing it for 8 years. And so I think that they've probably seen a lot of improvement there. So preconditions, you need to start in the spring with 25 to 30 genetically diverse colonies. And you can have a control group. I kind of have a control group because the club, Franklin County Club, has an apiary sheriff's department in Lewisburg. And I think it's pretty close to the outer edge of where our yards are. But I'm hoping that it's far enough so that there won't be a big mixing. And we're going to maintain them in the standard way with treatments and feeding and all of that. And you are allowed to feed. In this protocol, you are allowed to feed. You're just not allowed to treat. Spring treatment. So in their protocol, they used oxalic acid, but really you can use whatever your preference is. My preference is formic acid, simply because here in the Piedmont, I hardly have any broodless period. And really and truly, that's when oxalic acid is going to be the most effective. I know they're doing a lot of experimentation, off-label experimentation, doing it every week for 7 weeks and stuff like that. But I saw Jennifer Berry do a talk not too long ago where she was thinking that wasn't the magic bullet. Let's see. So this is the first year of the project, how you start. I did not start here. Terry and I had a lot of work to do before we got to this spot. We didn't really decide to do it until late spring, like April. And so we had a lot of work to do. We had to find places, talk to farmers, find places where we could put out bees. I already had some in the area that, because of my setup, I had out yards around my home yard for breeding purposes. So we did have a start on that, but we needed way more in a bigger area. And so we had to clear it. We had to go and talk to landowners. We had to clear areas to set up stands. We had to collect materials for stands. We went around collecting free pallets and block to put our hives on. We had to do we did bring in some more genetics. We tried to bring in more VSH type stock from different breeders in similar type of areas, weather-wise. We had just a whole bunch to do. I had to bush hog these areas. We had, and with just two old ladies, and Terry's not as old as I am, but two old ladies, that was a lot of work. And we also had to, do mite counts and do treatments and stuff like that. So it really took us all summer to get geared up. So we are in a position now where we have all these out yards, and we actually have a larger area than what Tom Seeley has in the Arnott Forest. So I just happen to be lucky and live in a place where there's a lot of open area. It doesn't look like it because on the roads there's a lot of houses, but the houses are just on the roads. And in between, inside those areas, it's hunting land, it's continental can land, it's all along the Tar River. There's nothing from the Tar River north, so for quite a ways. So I know it's probably hard to see from there. That was about as big as I could get it. But what you're looking at there is, let's see if I don't know if I can get it any bigger than that. I don't think I can. So what you're looking at here is the first season. So at the top, you have, let's see, you have dead outs, you have, let's see. Okay, you have your develop and survivor, and you have your actions. Okay, so those are the columns. So I just want to see what they actually said on there because I can explain it from here. So in the winter, you're going to come with deadouts. That's your first column. And then you're going to have the ones that survive. And then the last one is your, let's see. Can't see what it says.
Undeveloped.
But actually, that's not even the most important one. Let's go down to the next one because that's where spring starts. That's just your winter stuff. So what you have on the next row down, where you see the light yellow, okay, that's your spring. And so what you're going to do is you're going to put in your box, you're going to put in a wired frame for drone. Okay. If they raise drone comb, that's good. If they don't raise drone comb, that's the next line down. See where the comb is in there and it's gray in the first column. If they didn't raise drone comb, you're not using that hive. You might can requeen it with something, that and not do away with all the bees, but you wouldn't want to raise a queen from that stock. So in the middle, that is where that hive has actually filled out the drone comb and raised the drone comb. Okay. So then your next step is to move the queen above a queen excluder. Okay. And then go down to the next line. You've got your queen there and your drone comb, and you're going to split the queen off. Okay. And then you're going to see what they raise. Okay, if they don't raise any queens, that's the first column. That one is a no-go. Okay. Then on your next, in the middle column, you've got where they're actually raising queens. And then you split that hive into 4 nukes, well, 4 different hives. So now you've got a queen mother and 4 daughters. Well, hopefully $4. And the next one, if there are any that are dead out, they're not part of the project. So say you've got 3. If you're lucky, maybe all 4 do it. So then you've got these, the mother, the queen mother, and then the 3 or 4 daughters if you're able to raise all 4. And so then you've got your, should have made different notes. Okay, so then you've got your, hopefully your well-developed nukes that are going to go through the summer. If any of them don't make it, you should have hopefully that bottom row, that's in your fall. You should end up with a couple of good strong hives in the fall. So your indicator frame of drone, if they don't make drone comb, that's a hive that you're probably not going to want. You want 15-20% drones. You want a high drone count. I know a lot of people think so much about the queens, but drones are exceedingly important. You've got to consider them. So basically, when you split your queen off, everybody here has made artificial swarms by taking a split, right? Anybody not know how to do that? You're all beekeepers, I know you know how to do that. So when you get to the fall, depending on how many you have, you might have more than 2. In this example, it shows 2, but you might have more than 2. You might have all 4 make it. And then rinse and repeat every year. You're going to be doing this. Okay, so the benefits of working in a localized area, like I have my area that I'm covering is probably about 6 by 6 miles square, and it's very rural, and so it's pretty easy for me to run breeding programs there. Kind of messed things up when those other bees were there, but they're all gone now. So this protocol allows for some influx, small influx of outside bees. It's not the sort of thing where you can't have any outside bees, as long as it's not this overwhelming thing. And that's why it's difficult for commercial beekeepers to do this because they can't afford to lose bees, and it's difficult for backyard beekeepers to do it by themselves because they generally don't have this isolated area. They usually have a lot of other beekeepers around them and that sort of thing. So I just happen to be lucky to be in an area to do this. So the benefits of having a closed system is you're going to reduce the spread of disease and pests. Your mating density population is going to be similar to in nature. They're going to be adapted to the local environment. I've been raising using survivor stock for 15 years now. And so I have a lot of good survivor stock that matches the area that they're from. So forage, seasonality, disease variants, all of these things are influenced by your local environment. Swarms may contribute to reintroduction of honeybee into the wild. So I know I've put off a lot of swarms in my day. So, with all the best intentions, you don't get all the swarms. And so I know I've populated my area with swarms that have become unmanaged. So what we want to do is move the varroa toward becoming naturalized and other things as well. So eventually, because pretty much everything that is killing our bees, varroa, nosema, your various pests, most everything is an exotic species. None of it is from around here. So they have had a hard time dealing with that. And that's part of what this selection process will be, is the survivors will have sort of an ability to deal with all of these new pests. And that's why it's not focused just on varroa, but all these other things that can hurt the health of your hive as well. Okay, so this is an area, a Google map of where we have our stuff, and those bubbles take up a lot of space, so they're not as close as you actually think they are. And then I do have some that are more isolated that are outside the this area, and that's kind of what I use for my control group. Although I have to say it's VSH stock, and so in general, a lot of my stuff is already somewhat resistant. I don't tend to have lots of high mite counts. Every once in a while you get an anomaly. But part of that comes from in the past year or so, we've been moving a lot of things around, and we've been splitting not just from my hives, but from Terry Wright's hives as well. And she was not practicing the same sort of non-treatment things that I was doing with my survivor stock. So it might take a little while to get back into that. So I'm located on the other side of Franklinton, and I'm right along the Tar River. And then north of the Tar River, there's like nothing all the way up to Kittrell. And so I have my stuff spread all the way to Creedmoor. That's the one that's out of the circle here, in Creedmoor. And then I have a couple in North Raleigh. And then we have the Sheriff's Department in Lewisburg, which is just outside. I think as time goes by, that might merge with the western hives that are west of US 1. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. So yeah, this is just a slide of where our stuff is in Google Earth. And the pink there, Betsy's Bees, that's where I'm located. And so this is a large area, lots of farm land. That's what we had to go around talk to the farmers about. I already had some on farms in the area, but we had to go talk to people and see if we could do more. And then I've got, we spent the summer, one of the things we did was we spent the summer collecting wild swarms, and we also located abandoned hives that had been abandoned by other beekeepers and got stock from them. I raised some queens from them, and so we started new hives with them. We also did cutouts from local farms, local places that need to get rid of their bees. And a lot of them said that they'd had bees in those structures. A lot of them were abandoned farm structures. They'd been there in those structures for as long as they could remember. So that is a good genetic population to bring to your yard, because they've been self-sustaining, which is a really good thing. Okay, so our 2021 preparations for this project, we're lining up bee yards, because you have to go around and talk to the farmers. Building, cannibalizing, and repairing equipment. because you gotta have equipment to put them in. And so that was a lot of time spent in the shop. Bush hogging and clearing the locations once we okayed it with the farmers, which requires loading up the tractor and going over there and mowing, and scrounging materials to make stands, high stands. So, I'm retired, I am not rich. And so we spent a lot of time scrounging free pallets and building materials. We got a really good haul of cedar lumber from a guy that I know. And so we've been building some equipment out of that. Setting up the hive stands, that's where we got the pallets. We had to scrounge cinder blocks to put the pallets on. We had to make increases. We raised daughters from some of the newly added stock. And we had to do mite counts. And so I did mite counts on 135 different hives. And that takes a little bit of time. And then we did a fall treatment. And the protocol that the Darwinian protocol calls for a spring treatment. And so, of course, we were way past that. So we had to do all this stuff in preparation before we can go back to actually start the project. So our project will start in the spring. And so we did a fall treatment. Let's see, I think I have, let me picture that. So it goes to the left too, that says what yard and what number beehive, because all my beehives are numbered. So I just cut that part off. So when we did our counts, some of the small nukes, I only took 100 bees, but the larger ones, I took 300 bees, and that's that first column there, and that explains the different numbers. And then what the mite count was there, and how many mites per 100. And one of the reasons we did mites per 100 because we submitted it to the, what's the one that did the, I'm having a blank here, the bee. Yeah, for their information. And then we did treat with hot guard because when we were doing this, it was August and it was really hot. And so my preference is to use Mite Away, but it was too hot for that. So we did one with hot guard, and then we went back and did a second treatment on any that still were hot. So that's just one little section. We have like 150 colonies, and we don't now. We did that. We've combined and all that. And so in the spring, we'll start with like 30 hives, 30 of the best ones. And so what we'll plan on doing is starting as soon as it's warm, I guess, warm enough to do stuff, we'll start doing just like they did on the chart. We'll treat everybody one last time, take mite counts, and start our project. Are there any questions?
How long do you plan to go?
Oh, yeah, this protocol is for 4 years. Well, that's the minimum, 4 years, 4 to 10. But you should start seeing some evolutionary changes within the first 4 years. So it's a long-term project. It's all about speeding up the natural selection process, putting pressure on the populations.
Has anybody ever figured out exactly what it was about the ceramic that allowed it to coexist with the varroa mites? Was it resistance to the viruses?
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting deaf. Let me come up close.
Okay. Has anybody figured out what feature allowed the Avis ceramic to exist in the corollite, coexist, okay? Was it resistance to the viruses, or was it cleaning hygienic behavior by thereby removing of the corollite? How did they coexist, and can we bring that here?
Okay, so it's probably, instead of bringing in another exotic,
The
creature,
survivors, though,
huh?
we're calling it two exotics instead of the ones that we really are trying to reproduce.
What the Avis ceramic?
You know, the Avis liver, we're trying to make them find the right behavior, the right stock, the right whatever, the one exotic gene that might come about to create.
Well, Avis ceramic is Eastern honey,
I know,
but that's different from the Western.
why can't we get it here? Avis, why can't we get Avis surrounding here? It'll take care of the remote problem.
I'm really leery of bringing one more exotic animal into the country, because every exotic animal that has come to this country, every exotic pest and every exotic creature that they brought into the country, they did it with good intentions. And things didn't always work out.
Well, I see it as a win-win.
Ceramic, Avis ceramic evolved for 30 million years with the mud.
Right.
Okay,
Why?
so what this is doing, what this project is doing, is compressing that 30 million years to make our honeybee also compatible like it is with this.
So what is it about Avis ceramic that allows it to sell?
One of the things is that the vine only reproduces in drone root. It does not reproduce in worker root. So if that were true here, you would have a limited season of reproduction for mites. Because you don't always have drone root. So yeah, see, evolution is a really interesting thing. Things can be, you can put pressure on things and cause it to start to develop around it. Like the elephants. This was happening within 8-year civil war in the area that was happening. 8 years. In 8 years, they were making these dramatic changes. And by having a localized population, and not interfering in the evolutionary aspects of it, you're not gonna, all the dead ends are not gonna breed. You're only gonna be breeding for the survivors. Because you're not gonna treat, there's no treatment. After the first year, they do allow the treatment the first year. And I kind of already, I think, to the point where I've been going treatment free for so long, I would have, I think, a pretty good population of fairly hygienic bees. But there's so many other things involved with, it's not just the mites. Yeah, it's all of the different things the mites that, and it's Nosema ceramic. It's deformed wing virus. It's this, it's that. You know, there's like 30 different diseases and pests besides Varroa. Varroa vectors a lot of those diseases, but not all of them. And so what happens when you throw all of the alleles into that bingo spinner, and the ones that are not suitable to survival die out. By putting a lot of pressure on that, and that's why I say it's brutal. You're going to get large losses. When I first quit treating, I got large losses. But then as the years went by, and this is a 4-year minimum project, the the selective pressure. That's different from targeted pressure. The targeted pressure, which I've been doing for 15 years now, is selecting for certain characteristics. My characteristics that I was usually selecting for was I do behavior, calmness, gentleness, because I don't like to be like that. And I don't want my kids to be mean. So good honey production, good overwintering, you know, different things like that. So that actually limits your genetics. You can bring in a lot of genes, but functionally, the genetics aren't diversified. What you want is a diversification of functionality. And so even though, like, I could bring in all these different genes and mix them up and keep bringing in more genes all the time, but those genes might not be beneficial, but then they're mating with everything in my yard. And so it's not concentrating those beneficial genes. So what happens with this protocol is you are going to end up having the non-beneficial genes for survival. You're not going to help them survive. Treating for the low life. Just going to let it go. And then you get survivors from that. And then we'll go to that protocol again. We can say that chart, spring, we're not going to treat them. That's just the first year. Then the next 4 years, you're still going to do expansion from those survival hives, and you go through the same steps that is on that chart, where it's foundationless drone. What you're going to do is put a wire cone that has no foundation in it, and you put it in there. And if they don't draw a drone cone, you're done with that. Now, I would throw the bees away, but I would pinch that quick and do something else with it.
Why is it important to actually make sure that they are drawing the cone themselves as opposed to, say, giving them drone cone that you have and then just talk?
Okay, so because what you're looking for is not just survival, but for growth, expansion. And if your bees don't draw drone cone, you're forcing them to draw a drone cone. If you put drone foundation in there in the spring, that's what they're forced to draw. Okay? But if you give them a choice, if they draw it, great, okay. If they don't draw it, that's not a good thing. So you want to give them that choice, because proliferation is one of the things that you're looking for this. And your drone population is as important as your queens. And people don't always think about that. In fact, I think it's just my personal opinion, so don't quote me on this. But I think that's a lot of what's wrong with the Georgia bees that come in the packages. Queens, for the last 10 years, the queens have been going steadily downhill. And more, losing those queens within a couple of months of installing packages. And I think it's because one reason is that they don't keep enough drones in that area. Those are industrialized operations. They're just throwing bees in a box. And they're not always giving
Betsy, how can you be sure that the fact that you're splitting your hives? How can you be sure that that the artificial swarm that you pretty much split the hive isn't a large percentage of your varroa control?
Well, I've always had good luck with split. And of course, in the protocol,
Well, I'm saying of the Brutus period, that's
what now?
the Brutus period, this is back when you,
Well, Brutus period is the best way to knock the mites down. In fact, I think that's why I have the mite counts, is because every spring I'm splitting like crazy.
want me to opposed to natural selection. Back when you're
Oh,
artificially.
Okay, maybe I wasn't clear on that. You're letting the bees draw queens from this. In that chart, okay, where you're gonna take the queen in an artificial split, that's the only artificial split you're doing really. Well, for queens. You're gonna let them draw their own queen cells. The bees are gonna choose.
Right.
The queens. And then you split those.
But you always gonna have a Brutus period, right?
Well, you're gonna have a Brutus period then, but then you shouldn't have a Brutus period after. Unless they swarm, which is part of the protocol. You are, the whole concept is to let the bees swarm at will. You're not going to control the swarm. And so hopefully you're going to have some wild bees out there. If you want to do stuff with your bees, you really want to have those swarms in your operation, then you could artificially swarm. But the protocol calls for letting them swarm at will. Once they're established, once those hives are established, let them swarm. And then survival of the fittest. Those, like Seeley showed, only about 24% of those wild swarms survive, but they're going to be survivors. They're going to be the ones, the genes are being culled by Mother Nature. And because this involves hundreds of genes, whereas the targeted genes, like what I've been doing for 15 years, targets like 5 characteristics, maybe 6. And so, but Mother Nature is controlling for multiple hundreds of genes all the same.
So at what point do mite counts not become the metric for whether you have a survivor stock? Because I think if you're constantly splitting your hives, your mite count will always get knocked down and it'll always come back, right? So
Well, see, in this protocol, I won't be doing anything to mites.
okay. So the idea is
Mites
that
will grow as they grow.
and the fact that they survive with however many mites they have is the fact that they are survivor stock. They could have 50 mite counts per 300, but they're doing fine because they're managing it within themselves.
Right.
So you're not worried about mite counts, you're just worried about the fact that they're survivors.
And since I started with hygienic stock to start with, then the bees do a lot to keep the mite count. So, and as things change, it's not beneficial for the mites to be so virulent that they kill off the host. So that is one of the things that they're trying to do with this protocol, is to create a less virulent mite. Like the mites coexist with the bees in Apis ceranae just fine. It's not a problem. That's it.
I also like the glasses.
What?
Glasses or no glasses.
Normally I don't wear glasses. I'm only a little bit nearsighted. I had LASIK surgery a long time ago, but you keep getting nearsighted, then it stops you from listening. So I've gotten a little bit nearsighted. I like to have to drive with, but I don't usually wear glasses when I'm with the kids.
And then my second question was, you dealt with a lot of legacy hives and stuff. How did those
Some have done well, others not so much. Sometimes you have to take a grain of salt when people say, oh yeah, these bees have been in this house for 50 years. Well, it might not be the same long. And I try to tell people that. But, you know, based on what they say, we bring them home and hope for the best. So,
Are you part of the network of other beekeepers who are using this protocol, and if so, is there a website or something for beekeepers? And keep up and see what is-
I have not actually contacted other beekeepers that are doing this yet, but I know Randy Oliver is doing it to some extent. He's a commercial beekeeper, so I'm not sure. He likes to experiment, so I think, you know, he'll probably go with it. Does everybody know Susan Spencer? Yeah, she's a state beekeeper. She's a she knows it. And she knows Thomas person. And so she's going to introduce me to him. I want to get in contact with him because I've been following his work. And so I would like to be in touch. And we figured we would start to get in touch this year. We're actually starting the program. This year has been, you know, we thought about starting, but it turned into a really large project. It took a lot of time. It took us all summer to get it geared up. But we have a lot of yards now. And we have at least 6 by 6 square mile area that we're working in that is mostly rural. So I figure this spring, just really jump in and do the program. And if anybody's interested in getting a copy of that stuff, if you just email me, I can send you copies of the protocol that this is based on. If you go online, Constantine has multiple videos on the Darwinian aspect, and he actually has a video on how you can do it to a certain extent, not to the extent that we're doing it, but to a certain extent, it's just a regular background. Some of the protocols.
So for everyone here, what email address?
Betsy'sBees@gmail.com. And it's Betsy's BETSEY.
A question. The program is 4 years. At the end of 4 years, your goal is not to have the tree become.
At the end of 4 years, you are hoping to have mite-resistant and disease-resistant survival stock.
So then you're looking for 0 home counts.
Not a zero mite. Compatibility. Because even the Apis ceranae, Eastern honeybee,
Right.
survives very nicely with mites.
With a small number of lights.
Well, there might only be on
On the drone.
on the drone.
Right.
So it still remains to be seen what happens with ours. Now, most of my stock, because it's been survivor stock that I would read from every year for 15 years now,
Right.
in the DSH to start with, my life counts generally
If I were to clinically close this room and put 5 hives in it, by taking the queens out I could eliminate all blue mites. I could take care of red mites by a treatment. I would have 0 mites in those 5 hives. If I let those out into the wild,
They would have mites again in no time.
but where would they get them from?
From other bees.
But in your area, you're trying to control it. What I'm saying is, if you take yours to the extreme, that's what you would be doing.
Well, that should, it's closed, but it's not for bees.
I know, I understand, but you're trying to develop this location.
Right.
Okay,
And
I
that-
got you.
That could be part of why mine are low,
I understand.
because there are not.
Yeah, yeah.
But even so, I do have mites. And I have controlled them for years without treatments. And so even though when I pick my breeding stock every year, that's one of the things I'm looking for to my pets.
Right.
And what hopefully that showed me is that these bees are highly hygienic.
Yes.
And so that is one of the characteristics that you are looking for, but it is not the only characteristic. You know, it's not just mites for your bees. It's the diseases that the mites carry,
Sure, absolutely.
and it's other pests as well. So it's a brutal way to breed, but we all know breeding works. People have bred animals for many, many years for certain characteristics. Thing is, when you have targeted breeding by people, you're looking at such a limited number of characteristics. For example, in dogs, they ruined collies by breeding these long, narrow heads. They were stupid. And, you know, Dalmatians, one of my favorite dogs, because I've had Dalmatians. They ruined Dalmatians with a lot of genetic problems because of inbreeding. And, you know, when you breed for a limited number of characteristics, you're going to breed a vitality.
The amazing thing about the experiments that you do here with this program is you're using heavy drone comb population. And those breed naturally mites. Contrary.
Well, I have not noticed that the bees in this country, these are my dogs, infest the drone. That's one of the differences. Apis ceranae, those mites only reproduce in drone. But if that were the case, then great, because if that drone freezing,
Yes, absolutely.
that would be great. You could really knock the mites down like that.
So, you know, most species, the bad thing, since you're doing that, because of time, people step back, if there's enough outside influences, that's going to keep that, because you always have to have the results. You have to say, dog, species. Might be doing the same thing here, if you know what the long-term results might end up being, and it could be worse.
Well,
Or have you thought
Tom
about-
Seeley has been looking at the Arnott forest population since at least the 50s. And that has been self-sustaining. That's what's wrong.
Was that a larger group of bees though?
17, the Arnott forest is 17 square kilometers.
So therefore,
So actually, I'm working in this large space.
when you decide what you're doing, let's say you decide you're not going to treat, then you do, still
Well,
do.
this
like that,
protocol is set up for guinea bees, and those
Okay.
beekeepers have a lot of mites.
Yes,
I never treat prophylactic. So when it comes to spraying, like in their protocol, we just treat everything. I'll be this person, and I will only treat those that are both.
Okay, so you don't treat those yard. Okay, all right.
I have for 15 years, and I think that's one reason, because I use the survivor stock. I've already got like a little jump on this whole project, because I have been using survivor stock. for 10 years.
Have you had any problems when they do that? And, you know, you get that migration of the mites from here to this, I got tested good. So you treated this one, now they go next door and infest that one.
No, it's the dead. When you treat them dead. When I was at Jack Tabb's, we always used the formic acid.
Yeah.
Now, it has its limitations because you have to be careful with the temperature. But I really feel like formic acid is the best. It's one of the few things that gets fungal captured. Most everything else is just treating as athletic mites, which is only like maybe 40% of mites in your eye. I think I read somewhere that 60% of the mites are in your eye.
Yes.
And of course, what I'm doing is raising queens. So I have this constant rate and brood in my lay boxes. I raise my queens in 5 minutes. I don't use lay boxes. So at the end of the season, my stronger ones are able to bring it up. And so that is getting constant rate and brood. And it's that rate and brood that really knocks the lights down. But some of it's just the hygienic behavior. PSH is very hygienic. Like I had one breeder queen that was just amazing. She was a 3D. And her mite count, when I did a test on her mite count, was like 2. And so then when I wanted to see, you know, how I could not make sense. I had a hive that had what I consider a high count at 7. And so I took 2 frames of cat food and baby food. And I kind of went off and forgot because I had some family issues. And when I came back to it, so I took it out of the freezer and popped it back in mine. And within a few days, they had both sides of both frames cleaned out, completely cleaned out. And she had relayed them. And on day 11, after putting them back in to the hive, had a perfect rash return. It's just the right age for me to go. So, I'm sorry. I was running away.
No, I was just going to say, you know, we are a little tight on time. If anybody has a question, please, we can on the next announcement.
Sure.
Catch you after. So,
Yeah, okay. Anybody wants to talk?
Yeah. Says, $25. Thank you. From the club, yes, absolutely.
Thank you very
for
much.
being here.
Thank you, Betsy. All right, guys. I thought that was fantastic. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. I think next we're going to go ahead and turn it over to John from Beekeeper's Corner.
Okay, first item, I got 2 items tonight, to cut it short. First item, we're still seeing high mite counts after treatments. We've seen it down in our apiary, I'm seeing it around with other people. If you haven't tested